I'm Mike Quincy, and this is the review of the Jeep Wagoneer. The big news for this incredibly massive SUV is the arrival of a 420 horsepower twin turbocharged inline-six cylinder engine, which replaces the 392 horsepower 5.7 liter V8. Not only is the smaller engine more fuel efficient than the V8, it also makes the Wagoneer quicker and quieter. The Wagoneer competes with other gargantuan three-row SUVs, like the Ford Expedition, Lincoln Navigator, Chevrolet Tahoe, Cadillac Escalade, and Toyota Sequoia. And just look at it. There's no doubt it's a Jeep. From the wheel arches and squat version of Jeep's traditional 7-vent grille, it's easy to spot the Jeep heritage. And it's impossible not to notice the high off-road stance, clearly letting you know that you're about to climb up into something pretty beefy. For our test program, we purchased a 4-wheel drive Series II. The final assembly point for the Wagoneer is in Warren, Michigan. We added the convenience group, which includes heated second-row seats, a head-up display, air suspension, and other items, as well as the premium group, which brings 22-inch wheels, an enormous sunroof, and a few other odds and ends. Adding Jeep's absurdly high $2,000 destination fee, the grand total came to $82,285. And just to do a price check, the Wagoneer is about $10,000 more than its nearest rivals. This is not a cheap Jeep. It's no accident the Wagoneer's styling leans heavily on the original, which debuted in 1963. And what a year that was. So we wouldn't recommend the Wagoneer if you're afraid of heights, because there is somewhat of a climb to get inside. All models come with standard running boards, which definitely helps getting in, and you've got this grab handle here. You pull yourself up and down, and it's a pretty reasonable access, but again, you gotta climb up. This truck's optional air suspension will ease entry and exit out of this big SUV by lowering the truck when you put it into park. But the system moves so slowly, you probably hop out before it's even done. Still lowering. And it's done. So the inside of the Wagoneer is pretty nice, as it should be for $82,000. We particularly liked the wood inlays on the dash, the door panel. There's lots of exposed stitching, and that's a real nice quality job. The leather wrap on the steering wheel feels especially good in your hands. Another part of our fit and finish evaluation is looking at the switchgear. How does it feel? We really like these knurled ends on the gear selector right here. The toggles also feel really good and real positive, as does the steering wheel buttons. However, the steering wheel stalks, kind of flimsy. There aren't really good detents for the rotary knobs for the audio system, although don't get me wrong, we're always happy to see these manually tuning things in this age of digital touchscreens. So it's sort of a mixed bag when it comes to the switchgear. All in all, it's pretty nice, but it's not $82,000 nice. So the Wagoneer's controls are certainly a mixed bag. Some work actually pretty well, but there's a few real essential items that we think they completely messed up. There's these touch capacitive controls on the side of the screen here to operate the seat heat, the seat cooling, the heated steering wheel. They don't give any haptic feedback. Half the time you hit it and it doesn't turn on. So we're really not big fans of that because it's just not very responsive to the touch. We will say that the Jeep and Chrysler products and Dodge products, they have these audio buttons on the back side of the steering wheel hub. These are super handy. If you're new to the brand, you might not even know they're there, but once you get used to them, the right side adjusting the volume, the left side advancing the next track, it is super, super convenient. I love that. But the biggest gripe with the steering wheel controls is that for some reason, they include two separate buttons to operate the cruise control. Me, I'm a huge fan of adaptive cruise control. Once that was put into cars, I felt like I couldn't live without it. But for whatever reason, Jeep, Chrysler, Dodge, they insist on having two different buttons here. You can push one button on the right side of the steering wheel controls that operates the regular cruise control. However, there's another button within this same little pod if you want to use adaptive cruise control. We think that might be confusing to new buyers. You have to not think that you have adaptive cruise when you have regular cruise control. I think the first time that I drove a Chrysler product with these two different buttons, I hit regular cruise control thinking it was adaptive. I'm coming up next to the car in front of me. The gap is getting closer. And I'm like, why isn't the adaptive cruise control working? Well, it's because it wasn't on. So you have to remember to hit the right button if you like adaptive cruise control. At 10.1 inches, the screen itself is actually pretty large, but a lot of the icons are pretty small, which might make it difficult to hit the right one while you're driving. So the Uconnect 5 infotainment system is pretty logically organized, and it's highly customizable. So once you probably set it up once, you'll probably be good. The homepage is a little overwhelming at first because there are so many options. A lot of the touch points are a little bit small, so it'll take a little practice to get it exactly how you use it. We do like the fact that the menus pop up pretty easy once you choose, say, for example, the climate system. This is one of those systems that the more you use it, the easier it's going to get. The Wagoneer seats are wide and supportive, good for a long drive. We also really like the side bolstering, holds you in place really well. The Series II comes with 4-way lumbar for both front seats, so that's definitely an added bonus. So getting into the second row of the Wagoneer is pretty easy. We've got the floorboards that we already talked about. Hey, look at this, another grab handle, pull yourself up. Once you're in, you're gonna find lots of leg room. The seats themselves have a pretty natural seating posture, pretty comfortable back here. I'm about 5'10". I have a decent amount of headroom. The previous Wagoneer that we tested, we got captain's chairs, which certainly made it a little bit easier to get into the third row, which we'll get into. But this time around, we did the split bench. Offers, obviously, a center seating position, so you can actually put more people in this truck than if you got the captain's chairs in the second row. So getting into the third row isn't that much of a struggle, mostly because there's this little button on top of the seat back, which opens up a pretty good path to get in this third row, which is actually usable by regular size adults. Like most SUVs, there's a number of ways to open up the rear hatch. For the Wagoneer, we're just gonna use this little button next to the license plate. And it's, as always, it's nice to have a power activation to get in the back of this big truck. As you can imagine, a rig of this size will haul a lot of stuff. And it's 63.5 cubic feet. It's among the largest in its class. What we like about the Wagoneer is it has a really wide opening. The cargo area sill is not too high, but of course you need to fold down both rows of seats to expand the cargo area. Right now, the third row seat is in the up position. Now you'd think that the straps that are most obvious are these ones right here, but they don't actually fold the seats. You have to look for the little strap down here in the corner. You pull that and the seat comes down. You pull the other side and the seat comes down. Now, so once you learn that, you always know where to look. But the first time, you're like, well, that doesn't make any sense. A lot of SUVs, certainly of this expensive caliber, will have buttons on the side walls of the cargo walls to power the seats up and down. This $82,000 SUV does not have that. Since we test so many vehicles here at Consumer Reports Auto Test, we've gotten used to the fact that to close the rear hatch, the buttons are almost always right up here on the top, but not with the Wagoneer. The button to close this big hatch area is located right in this inside panel. However, once you hit the button, you have to move out of the way. So shout out to all the YouTube commenters talking about whether or not a vehicle comes with a full-size spare. Every trim line of the Wagoneer has a full-size spare. One of the reasons that SUVs are so popular is that they almost always bring a very high, upright, commanding driving position, and the Wagoneer is no different. There are some restrictions seeing out. This front roof pillar here, often called the A-pillar, is pretty thick, and there's other roof pillars on the side and behind me that are also pretty thick. So there is some visibility. That being said, there's a lot of room here for the driver, decent amount of headroom for me. I'm not that tall. The center console really isn't that intrusive, although we'd like to see a little bit more padding on the right side for the driver's right knee. But otherwise, the Wagoneer has a very agreeable driving position. So moving on to the Wagoneer's powertrain, I fondly remember the last Wagoneer that we tested, and it had this big burly V8 engine, which I have to say I miss a little bit. Listen, for those of you out there who did love the V8, just take a moment for a second for yourself. Silent moment. Okay. So we have to move on. The new mill is an inline 6-cylinder, and it is a gem of a motor. It is super smooth, it's really powerful, and it has a very refined sound to it. No, it doesn't burble like a V8, but it really, really gets the job done. And honestly, the folks that I work with here at Consumer Reports Test Track have said to me, said in our technical reports, and we published this inline-six from Jeep is just as nice and refined as the X5. And yes, I'm comparing a Jeep engine to something in a BMW. And if you're doing trucky stuff, like towing a trailer, you'll be pleased to know that this engine has 486 pounds-feet of torque. You're not going to be hurting for any kind of power or torque when you're moving around a heavy load. The Wagoneer comes with a super smooth 8-speed automatic transmission. It's very responsive, downshifts quickly. You hardly even know that it's working. The EPA estimates that the 4-wheel drive 6-cylinder Wagoneer will get 16 miles per gallon in the city and 23 on the highway. This is a slight boost compared to the 4-wheel drive V8 version, which got 15 miles per gallon in the city and 20 on the highway. Indeed, this inline 6-cylinder engine makes the Wagoneer quicker, more fuel efficient, and more polished. One of the Wagoneer's best attributes is a very quiet cabin. You won't really hear much unless you go on the highway. You'll get a little bit of road noise, a little bit of wind noise, but the engine mostly stays in the background. That is, until you put your foot into it, and it actually sounds really nice. So the Ram truck on which this is based has a live rear axle. The Wagoneer has an independent rear, which really helps to smooth out bumps. Only the harshest, biggest bumps come through, and even then it makes barely a ripple. Many Wagoneers also come with the optional air spring suspension instead of coil springs, and that also helps to smooth out the ride. So with the 6-cylinder under the hood, the Wagoneer definitely got lighter, which helped to improve the handling compared to the last V8 Wagoneer that we tested. Now that does not make it a light and lively sports car. This is still a lumbering beast. However, when we pushed it to its limits on our track, it still stayed composed and secure. But there's one area that we think the Wagoneer could definitely improve, and that's with the brakes. It had unusually long stopping distances, especially in the wet. My guess is if you're watching this video, you're interested in what most Jeeps can do when you step off the pavement. Most Wagoneers equipped with 4-wheel drive have a single-speed transfer case with full-time automatic 4-wheel drive high engagement, which automatically manages the power distribution between the front and rear wheels as needed. A 2-speed transfer case with a low range and all-terrain tires are optional, but the Wagoneer is better suited to boat launches, rough dirt roads, or a sand dune. The bottom line is this chonky SUV is not really designed to do any serious off-roading. The Wagoneer comes standard with all the active safety and driver assistance features that we like to see on new cars. So the Wagoneer is a super comfortable cruise ship that coddles occupants in a comfortable cabin that also stays really quiet. Keep in mind, the Wagoneer is somewhat of an old school truck since it's based on a Ram pickup. We give some props to Jeep for shaving about 80 pounds off the vehicle's weight by going from the V8 to the 6-cylinder engine. But still, as big as the Wagoneer is, it's not easy to park, and again, those brakes really need some work. And that's our review of the Jeep Wagoneer. To see the results of our testing, as well as other competing large SUVs, go to consumerreports.org.